Today, I think we have a very interesting conversation about digitalization in Islamic finance, about fintech. I think the pandemic has changed a lot of things, and in my opinion, the pandemic will accelerate all this process of digitalization and fintech. We will talk about all this process and all these things in the coming minutes. Dr. Mohammed Masumbila, professor of the King Abdulaziz University, will moderate the session, and appreciate to everybody to join this conversation. And Prof. Masum, please, the floor is yours. Thank you. Shukran.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. Good afternoon, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. This afternoon, we are very lucky to have notable scholars, industrialists, regulators, policymakers in fintech, Islamic fintech. Hello. Hello.
Yes, you're listening. You're very clear. Very clear.
Now, as we know that fintech, before I introduce the respectable panelist, let me give a short nutshell. You know, the fintech is an emerging chapter of economics and finance in the world. But then again, I have to alert that the fintech before COVID and the after COVID is different dimension, different mindset. Therefore, we are very much excited to know and understand the paradigm of fintech after COVID and the way forward. So now, even though the fintech is an emerging chapter of economics and finance, and it's really attract the attention of the global market, regardless of one's religious background or this status or geographical area, but everybody is interested, the eager to know and to benefit out of the spirit of fintech. Now, Islamic fintech under the Sharia principles is not an exception. Because it is a parallel the package there, but unfortunately we realize the propaganda or the popularity of fintech is much greater than the understanding and application here, because of there are many shortcomings in the fintech, regulatory frameworks, risk management, the products and the services, the professionalism or the skills, technical know-how, etc., etc. There are many shortcomings. Now, the conventional financial environment, they are coming up with a set of regulations, guidelines, professional trainings, and so on, mechanisms. But how about Islamic finance? In the Islamic fintech, I mean the idea of Islamic fintech, do we have enough preparation? I mean, to overcome all the shortcomings that I have mentioned earlier, and go at the same platform or the similar platform or side by side or parallel with the conventional fintech. Now, how we can see it was again the issue before COVID, but after COVID, now the dimension is changed. Now we have many prospects or the issues need to be resolved in order for us to facilitate or the benefit out of the fintech. Now, how the Islamic fintech is being seen by the government, regulators, Sharia scholars, researchers within the Maqasid Sharia. Are there any conflicting issue in Islamic fintech or the fintech within the Maqasid Sharia? So now our learned scholars, we have 3 scholars from different part of the world. They are very experienced scholars. They will be sharing their thoughts how we can foresee the Islamic fintech, i.e. the fintech within the maqasid al-Sharia, and all the technical issues like legal aspects, risk management, technical know-how, mechanisms, operational mechanisms, etc. So they will be sharing their thoughts, and the participants, our respectable participants in audience from different part of the world, please feel free to raise the issues that you have in mind, to clarify the issue and to see the Islamic fintech and its future, inshallah. Let me introduce our three notable panelists. First is Ms. Noor Diana Najwa, who is a senior executive expert in Islamic fintech and Islamic finance, and affiliated with the Malaysian Digital Economy Corporation, MDEC. And we have a second speaker, is Mr. Omar Munshi. He's a well-known speaker, and he is a well-known designer and the manufacturer of the fintech products and services, who is the co-founder at Athis Global Group of fintech startups. And the third speaker is the Professor Emilio Escartin, who is affiliated with the Fuel Venture Capital, partner of European and Middle Eastern Market Executive. And he is also serving as a professor at the IE Business School in Madrid. For your information, this particular program is the part of the regular talk series of Saudi Spanish Center of Islamic Economics and Finance. Without further delay, I'd like to invite all speakers to address or share their thoughts on specific issues. Like first speaker, we have Ms. Noor Diana. The issue here is the emergence of Islamic fintech. Why and how? If you could highlight your share your thought, is about 8 minutes. Thank you very much. Welcome, Ms. Noor Diana.
Thank you very much, Prof. Maksum. Assalamualaikum, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Gonzalo of the Saudi Spanish Center for Islamic Economics and Finance for having me to represent MDEC in this occasion. And I am also deeply honored to speak here alongside Mr. Umar and Prof. Emilio, who have had years of experience before me, but I'll try my best to share whatever I can in this session. By no means I'm not a scholar. I am, as mentioned by Prof. Maksum before, my name is Noor Diana Najwa, and I currently work for the Malaysian Digital Economic Corporation under the Fintech and Islamic Digital Economy Division. Okay, so but before we get started on the question of how Islamic Fintech came about, I would like to share a little bit of an overview of the current Islamic Fintech landscape, just to share a bit of excitement of what this space is currently offering. According to IFN Islamic Fintech Landscape, globally there are a total of 145 companies that is offering Islamic Fintech services across various verticals. And this includes areas such as crowdfunding, P2P financing, we have wallets, payments, remittance, robo-advisors, cryptocurrencies, and many others. But to compare, of course, the number are far much smaller than the larger conventional fintech industry, who would have now have over 20,000 fintech companies worldwide. But I think that only proof of how much more potential that this industry have to grow in the future. And I think the gap was somehow understandable, given that the fintech revolution of the conventional space has started to boom somewhere shortly after the 2007-2008 financial crisis. While for Islamic fintech companies, I think it really only started to picking up the pace somewhere around 5 to 6 years recently. And I'm sure Mr. Umar here was one of the pioneers when he started Athis in 2015, Mr. Umar. Now, I think it's worth noticing that this 145 companies came from a lot of leading Islamic finance jurisdictions. According to IFN, the UK now leads with 27 companies. Correct me if I'm wrong, Prof. Emilio and Umar, Mr. Umar. Malaysia follows suit with around 19 companies, 19 Islamic fintech companies. and we have UAE with 15, and of course there's Indonesia, we have Saudi, and also US. Coming back to the question just now of how Islamic fintech emerges, right? So I believe one of the commonly popular perspective would be that Islamic fintech emerges from the advancements of the Islamic finance industry. That's why I think most of the Islamic fintech companies originated from countries that have widely adopted Islamic finance. And as the world move forward, we have technology advancement, and we have seen the technology being applied to financial sector, and digitalization came about. We have IoT, and we have Industry 4.0 revolution. So Islamic finance will have to evolve, and the Islamic finance have to embrace this advancement. Hence, I think that's how Islamic fintech was born. And the best part of it is, I think we can say that Islamic fintech now will be able to leverage on the existing market of Islamic finance because it appeals to the same customer segment and market audience, which is probably very huge already. And I think despite having some stagnant growth rate in recent years, the Islamic finance industry is still expanding. And according to Thomson Reuters, Islamic finance assets is expected to reach up to $3.9 trillion by 2023. And with roughly around 1,400 Islamic financial institutions operating across 80 countries, I think the prospects for Islamic fintech are really quite bright. And apart from that, there's another perspective that I would like to share of how Islamic fintech emerges. Some would have said that Islamic fintech exists as a counterpart to the conventional fintech industry, like just how Islamic finance is a counterpart to the conventional finance industry. Though I don't think we commonly refer to fintech as a conventional fintech industry. But now the highlighted difference here would be, we know that generally, Islamic finance focuses on delivering financial services that comply to Sharia principles, but it was delivered through the familiar banking and capital market products and instruments. And of course, it was provided by the traditional financial institutions like banks. But from the first perspective just now, Islamic fintech in this context will only serve as an enabler, to better manage financial operations, the processes, and enhance the customer experience, because Islamic finance would like normally utilize technology such as maybe specialized softwares, and we have algorithms, and we have blockchains and stuff like that. But fintech, or I think Islamic fintech in this context, is capable of doing much more than that, because Islamic fintech can deliver the financial services through innovative solutions that can be totally independent from the traditional financial institutions. And I think that is exactly why fintech and Islamic fintech were often described as disruptors, to the financial industry, and also associated to the term alternative finance. And this by itself, I think, presents yet another opportunity for Islamic fintech players, because by having these solutions and services, they can actually tap into the unbanked community. Because I think in this case, Malaysia would probably not be the best example, because we have quite high bank population here of about 95%. But opportunities would have been really, really optimum in countries where the country have basically three components. If the country have a huge Muslim population, if the country have a huge unbanked community, and if the country also have high internet or mobile penetration. Because of this reach out.
Diana, Ms. Diana, sorry, yes. Because of the time constraint, can you please, in 1 minute time, can you please highlight that what is the uniqueness in Islamic fintech as compared to the conventional that we observe today? What are the uniqueness actually? In 1 minute time, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. So as I mentioned just now, I think one of the uniqueness will be this reach out capabilities, because for the Islamic finance, you have to be able to give the financial products and services through the traditional financial institutions. But through Islamic fintech, you can actually deliver these financial services, digital financial services, through mediums such as mobile phones, and as long as you have internet penetration, you will already have access to it. So I think that would be like one of the very highlighted features of Islamic Fintech. Yeah.
As we understood from Ms. Diana's intellectual thoughts, of course, there are huge prospects and prospects in Islamic fintech from regulators' point of view, from the market point of view, from the industrial point of view. Is undeniable that there are huge prospects. Now, yet there are a lot of challenges in Islamic finance that we can foresee. Now, I would like to raise a question to our learned scholar, Mr. Omar Munshi. The challenges of Islamic fintech, is the world ready for? Please, Mr. Omar Munshi.
Right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Maasum Billah. Good to see you again. When you talk about challenges, of course, there's a lot of challenges, and each point probably I can take quite some time to go through in detail. What I'll try and do is I'll probably try and break it down into a few parts. Yeah, and that would be in the context of looking at the ecosystem or looking at the stakeholders that need to be involved or need to be engaged so that Islamic fintech can thrive, and so that Islamic fintech can fulfill the potential and the need that is so high, especially today, right? And when you break it down, you have the people, right? You have people, the consumers, the users, the clients, and also basically the community. And this can be talked about at the local level or at the global level. Then we have the industry itself. And the industry here, we can probably broaden it to the Islamic economy, where you have various different stakeholders, industry players, organizations, institutions, and all that. And then you also definitely have the government, which plays a very, very key role in, especially in the regulators, and also in terms of policy making at the higher level, right? So there are various challenges in each of these different stakeholder category. And as I mentioned also, it's probably quite differing from different countries. But to try and generalize, I would say very, very important is government, because if government is not on board or is not able to facilitate, then in a sector like fintech, it becomes very, very difficult for innovation to happen, and very difficult for players to reach out to the market, right? Because it's a highly regulated space. It's not like many other verticals in the startup world where you can just start and break things and make mistakes and so on. When you're dealing with money, the government needs to be involved. So that's something very, 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 very critical. And so that's on one side. On the other hand, then you have the people. And people here, just now I mentioned users. That's one challenge there, where we need to really, really educate the masses, and educate them not only about fintech, but even going back to the basics of Islamic finance and what's halal and haram, and what's good and what's not good, and how you engage in finance, how you view finance in your life. That's something that really needs a lot of effort. And the internet is the perfect medium to spread the message and the beauty of Islamic finance. However, it is not that easy to reach out to people as well. So that's something else that requires a lot of effort. And aside from that, there's when you talk about the people of the community, it's also entrepreneurship. Now, this is the part that I'm most passionate about, because I can't do much about the government. What I can try and do is to help and push and support entrepreneurship within my own organization and in the ecosystem in general. Because entrepreneurship is it's supposed to be the DNA of Muslims. Unfortunately, because of the way the world has been moving the past few decades, or let's say the past century, this spirit of entrepreneurship has died down maybe, or is not as high as it should be. So this is something that is very, very critical for fintech to really make a difference in Islamic finance. Right? We need more entrepreneurs. We need more young or old, anyone, right? It can be a mix of fresh young people looking for new perspectives, or it can be industry people who have been there and done that, and now they want to go into a new area. So Alhamdulillah, it's picking up, but I still see that there's a significant lack of entrepreneurship in general in the Muslim world, right? And that, of course, overlaps with the availability of funding, but I will not touch too much about that. I'll jump to my last point, which is about the stakeholders, the industry stakeholders, the organizations and institutions. And here I will focus on this point quite a bit before I end, because before I pass it back to Prof, because I feel that this is the key driver that can change quite quickly, or can make a difference quite quickly, which is that the incumbent institutions, and here you talk about Islamic finance as well as the Islamic economy in general, need to understand and be aware of the potential value of engaging with the startup community and investing in the startup community, or working with the startup community. And I'm not just saying this based on a feeling or a hunch, but if you look at fintech in the wider space, in the conventional space, this is where we see the top biggest financial institutions having a very, very strong focus on investing in and working with fintech companies.
Thank you very much.
And that goes back to the fundamental nature.
Yeah. Just to, it's very interesting, but because of the time constraint, I would like to request you to highlight on what are the challenges, core challenges in setting up or establishing an Islamic fintech operation. I mean the production services. What are the core challenges actually? If you can highlight your thoughts in 2 minutes time, Mr. Omar Munshi.
Sure. So I guess the very, very important is to understand what product you want to bring into the market and why. And then from there, you really have to look at the regulations. And I would say today it's a global market. So if the regulations where you are based is not facilitative, you could potentially look at other financial centers around, like from Malaysia to Bahrain, and others that are emerging like Astana, right? So this is where you have that starting point. For Ethis, I can share my experience. Our experience is we spend many years and a lot of resources and time trying to get the licenses, and right now we have it. So now it's much easier, because I would say it's much easier, not easy, but it's much easier because there is some awareness and there's a lot of effort to support Islamic fintech by the governments, in various different Islamic finance hubs. So that's the first step, I would say. And once you have that and you have a good concept going, then the rest of it, you have to navigate in terms of how to get the resources you need to go to where you are. And one last point, Prof, if you don't mind, is maybe from the very beginning, there can be an approach where startups have their product, and the product is geared towards serving the needs of an existing incumbent large Islamic finance institution, because then you have a ready client, assuming they accept your pitch, and then you can reach scale quickly by providing value to a large institution that already has resources. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omar Munshi. As we know that there is a huge, prospects of Islamic fintech, yet there are a lot of challenges that our two learned scholars have shared the thoughts, but nobody touched on the impact after the post-COVID impact in Islamic fintech. Now, I would like to raise an issue to our learned scholar, Professor Emilio Escartin, on the global impact of Islamic fintech in the socio-economy. How do you foresee?
Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Masubila, for moderating this panel, and my co-panelists as well, Diana and Umar, for the high contribution. And also, I want to thank the Saudi Spanish Center for Islamic Economic and Finance for organizing this webinar. Okay, regarding the point, the global impact of Islamic fintech of social economy. Okay, let's start by saying that the type of Islamic social finance. We're going to talk about sadaqah, we can talk about waqf, we can talk about zakat, microfinancing, Mike Tagaful. But answering your question, I would like to start by saying that providing access to financial services is a universally shared vision for all nations, including Islamic countries. However, in reality, access to financial services is neither uniform nor consistent. So in some cases, the inability to access to the most basic of financial products and services prevents some segments of a country's population to fully participate in its growth and prosperity. So this translates into cost for the nations and inequalities in terms of the opportunities, and wealth can hinder economic growth instead of reaching its optimal potential. But again, it also enables shared prosperity for all segments of the society, which leads to improve social well-being and so on. So in this regard, the potential of Islamic finance in enabling greater financial inclusion is vast given its similarities. Islamic market solutions apply in the right manner, and I really believe that will benefit countless lives and communities by far. So by financial inclusion is broadly well defined as an economic state where individuals and companies are not denied to access to, let's say, basic financial services based on whatever motivations other than efficiency criteria. So it ensures that ease to access and ability and usage of the formal financial system for all members in the country, right? So I think the financial inclusion is quite important to have a positive impact into the social and economy, ecosystem. And on the other hand, we need to point that there are roughly 2 billion people that are currently unbanked based on the information of the World Bank. So traditional Islamic financial institutions face more intensified competitions with, let's say, fintech showing their pipe, and are also faced with demands for digital channels to perform transactions. For example, if we look at the current situation with the COVID, it's true that maybe this has benefited the digitalized all the businesses. Okay, so and definitely one of the, let's say, arms into the financial Islamic institutions is the blockchains. Blockchains has revolutionized the technology in order to help, let's say, other financial institutions to be much more competitive and reduce big time their costs, and at the same time given access to the minorities that they previously couldn't have access to the financial services. So for example, through the blockchain you can, let's say, digitalize all the Islamic contracts. So this will be a big, let's say, game changer into the financial Islamic institutions, right? So, and why blockchains make sense for the financial banks, for example, because it's friendly regulations. You can get an instant settlement. You don't need branch, and you can improve the digital payments and low cost and fees. So the other thing is that what happened with the cryptocurrencies? The cryptocurrencies are there, and they are highly controversial in terms of haram or halal, and this is, is according to the Sharia, let's say, compliant. But there are countries, for example, Bahrain or countries in the Middle East that they're, moving forward on this regard. So I think the impact is going to be highly positive from the social and economic perspective, and will improve much better, the lives of many people in the world, including into the Islamic, world and Islamic population.
Thank you very much, Professor Emilio. Now, how do you foresee the future of Islamic fintech in the Western countries?
Well, there are big initiatives into the Western country regarding the Islamic industry. I know from the fact that the European Bank, the European Investment Bank is trying to promote this activity and develop much more the presence or open a new vertical into the Islamic financial services. If we look at the numbers of the World Bank, there are about 70 million microfinance or micro companies and small companies globally, and those companies, those 70 million, are facing credit constraint. Okay, so and it's estimated that over 5 trillion annually, $5 trillion annually is required to fill this financing gap. Okay, so I want to say that in the Western countries, one of the most, let's say, private investors are the VC venture capital and private equity funds, and this should be one of the the roles, or the most important roles, I'd say, that they have to play, these people or these institutions, to promote the Islamic finance activity in the Western countries. Little by little, well, the activity is introducing in some countries, for example, in Luxembourg, or of course in UK, and with some players that you can find in the United States as well, and in Latin America. But again, one of the most important things here is the regulation. There are countries that the regulation is not in compliance with Sharia because it's not recognized as a new, let's say, way of doing business. But there are others that are more, let's say, friendly, country friendly, in order to promote the activity, that are taking steps forward in comparison with the other European or Western countries. I think that the regulation is quite important, as Umar said before, and the private initiatives that are coming up to the market are also quite interesting, in order to to promote the Islamic let's say Islamic fintech activity in the Western world, in comparison with the Middle East or Malaysia, where there are big examples.
Thank you very much, Professor Emilio. Could you please, as you mentioned earlier, that cryptocurrency in the under the Sharia principles is quite controversial, but do you think that the crypto asset is a solution for that?
Well, cryptocurrencies, okay, if we go to the cryptocurrencies, it's quite interesting topic, because cryptocurrencies are digital. Everybody knows about cryptocurrencies, not the digital or virtual currency that use cryptographics for security. The thing here is, some of the scholars are, let's say, supporting the idea that cryptocurrencies are just for, speculation or negotiation in the market, or just there are other, scholars that say this cryptocurrency or those cryptocurrencies are just backed by the dollar or US or the gold or oil trading, is going to be Sharia-compliant. So it depends I think it would be very, very helpful from the Sharia scholars' perspective to get a common opinion, or just one opinion, in order to facilitate, to promote this these assets in the market. Okay, because at the end, if you compare the cryptocurrency with the fiat currency, the only what you have is just the final uses of the cryptocurrency is just going to be to buy something in the market, or interchange the cryptocurrency for other sort of assets, asset class in the industry.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm so sorry for making it short because of the time constraint. Now we move to our second session. There's the session for the floor, Q&A session. I would like to invite the participants or the audience to raise your very relevant questions. Please introduce yourself and please address the question to specific panelists, and they will answer to you. Please, the floor, welcome. Any question, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please, please.
Okay, my name is Aisha Tajani. Sorry, I can't turn on my camera at the moment. My internet isn't so great. So I have a question. My question has to do with if we were meant to, when Islamic fintech becomes a thing, it becomes very well known, just like the regular fintech applications we have on our phones now. Is it likely to be regulated by the same financial institutions that currently regulate the fintech applications that we have in different countries, or would there be like some form of Islamic banking, should I say, legislature or some form of organization somewhere that regulates the rules that actually guide it? Because sometimes when it comes to Sharia compliance and all that, I know that there are different schools of thoughts in terms of Sharia. So how is that meant to be, how do I call it? How is that meant to be uniform? So this is something I would like any of the panelists to actually answer.
Your question addressed to whom?
I said any one of them actually.
Please, the respected panelist.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
You want to answer this question?
Yes, sure. Maybe I'll take up the first question, and maybe Prof. Emilio and Mr. Umar can add later. I think the question of uniformity will always be something that is very difficult to solve, because in terms of Islamic finance itself too, the cross legislature and cross-country regulation is quite different. But I think in terms of regulating fintech and Islamic fintech in their respective countries, it always depends on the type of regulators that is regulating the financial industry in that respective country. And we always have to look at as Mr. Umar has mentioned before, you have to look at the kind of fintech business model or the products and solution that you're providing, and you see if that particular operation is regulated by whether the banking for the banking regulators or maybe the capital market, and that's how you probably would have to get the licensing from. But in terms of Islam, Islamic part of it, whether you have some halal certification from your how do you call this, Islamic financial, not particularly financial, Islamic bodies that is in your country, then that will be something we have to look into to know whether you can get your products and services being stated as Sharia-compliant or not. Just to share a little bit from Malaysian perspective, in Malaysian context, we do have for the fintech companies and also other incumbents that is in the ecosystem, we do have one guideline which is called Islamic Digital Economy Guideline, (MIDYAR), that kind of outline all the necessary steps for a fintech company to know whether they can get a Sharia-compliant status or not. And I think maybe that is something that can be proposed to other countries too, which is really giving the proper guidance for the fintech companies to get their Sharia-compliant status. Yeah, I think that's it. Maybe Mr. Umar and Prophet Emilio want to.
Just to add something, that probably this products and services, anything that design or structured under the Sharia principles, one has to be screened through by the Sharia board or the Sharia supervisory board before the implementation. Thank you very much. Next question, please. Please.
Prof, there are a few questions in the chat if you want to look at that. But there's somebody here, Imam Asali, he's the one who asked the question.
Please. Feel free to answer.
So much for this opportunity. So glad to hear you all. I mean, it's very valuable from you. Thank you so much. So, however, I have a couple of questions. Now, in addition to this question that I have posted in the chat, there is something that's really a valuable question that we should care about, which is now, what can regulators and legislators do to facilitate the adoption of Islamic fintech? Now, are we going to have the issue with the traditional Islamic finance? For example, we have lack of unity of legislations in the major players in the industry. For example, between Malaysia and the Gulf countries, I believe you are aware about the differences between AWAFI and other standards. What I'm trying to say here, are we going to have the same regulators? Are we going to have the same problem that we carry on from our Islamic finance industry, or we are looking for betterment here?
Please answer to this. Who you address to, Mr. Omar Monshi or Professor Emilio?
I'd like actually to have all of them answer, especially with the question number 2. It's related to data. Now in fintech, we have something called customizations and enhanced data tools, which is it's really targeting specific customers and targeting their needs. Now, is that really Sharia compliance? We did not study that before the fintech coming. So
Mr. Omar Munshi, would you like to address this question?
Sure. So I think there were a few questions. The first one is about regulators and also I think about the incumbents. And for just also touching on the question earlier, that was from Aisha, I think. Every country is different, and in Indonesia, the regulators did look at Islamic fintech rather differently from the conventional. And in Malaysia is, I would say, essentially the same. However, there is an added layer in our case with the Securities Commission for the Islamic capital market side to look at it, and their Sharia advisory committee as well. So as Prof mentioned, you need to get proper Sharia advice and consultants. Yeah, but on to the next question. I think question 1, if I'm just reading out from the chat, should incumbents have an Islamic fintech strategy? And the answer is yes, yes, and yes. Definitely need to have a strategy. And I need to repeat that yes 3 times because it's very, very important. If not, then slowly the fintechs will chip away at what they have, which is their key value proposition today. And over time, then the banks will find themselves with a very limited scope of what they can do or what they should be doing, because the fintechs have started filling up the gap slowly. And suddenly, overnight, the fintechs have really started to dominate certain areas. So this is where I think there needs to be synergy between the two sides, the incumbents as well as the startups or the challengers, so-called. And this strategy, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just look at what's happening in conventional fintech, the larger financial system, and see what's really happening and what works and what does not work. Typically, direct investment from an incumbent to create their own fintechs doesn't seem to work well. Partnering with or investing in startups seems to have some good outcomes so far. So yes, I think that's very important. And your next question, very quickly, I think your issue is about data and trying to target people based on their behavior, based on data, and that may not be so ethical. Because from a Sharia compliance point of view, I don't think if there's no deceit, there's no trickery, there's no hacking, I don't think there's any issue of compliance. But if you talk about ethics, is it right to target somebody, for example, from social media, somebody's family just passed away and he's sad, and a certain marketer will target that person to sell certain things to sad people, for example, right? So that may not be ethical. And I think we need to look beyond compliance and also look at whether it's toyib, whether it's good, and whether the outcome is in line with the objective or the spirit of Sharia.
Mr. Omar Moshi, just to add here, what is the ethical principles from the divine perspective in data protection, i.e. the importance of big data in Islamic fintech?
I think it's very critical, and honestly, there's not much work from what I know yet going into this. But as more and more organizations, fintechs, Islamic or non-Islamic, get data of Muslims and start to target the Muslim community, which is already happening, then I think it's very, very critical. And it can become an issue in the long run if we don't start looking at it seriously or regulators don't start looking at it.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, next question. I see one question in the screen. It's to Professor Emilio. Would you like to answer this question?
Yeah. Okay. Well, regarding the question about what should incumbents do about all these, do they need an Islamic fintech strategy? Definitely yes. Without a strategy, is nothing to do. The other question is related with what kind of regulator and legislator do facilitate the adoption of Islamic fintech? See, one of I have seen a lot of initiatives into the Islamic fintech space in the last let's say 5 to 6 years, but I have not seen very much Islamic fintech initiative to become banking as such. All right, so there are a very important play that the regulators have to adapt their rules and their policies in order to promote these small initiatives into the Islamic fintech space, because otherwise these fintech initiatives, the Islamic fintech companies will never fly. I'm not talking about Malaysia or Indonesia. Maybe Umar, you can provide very good examples. I'm much more related with the Middle East, and in the Middle East, none of the governments wants to give a banking license to these Islamic fintech initiatives. I don't know why, because I had a very long discussions with the regulators in Dubai, promoting and helping the small fintech companies, because I was mentor of some of them. So, but they never get me a very straightforward answer. So one of the things, and I thank you, Iman, for this question. Definitely, the regulators play a very important role, as well as the legislators, in order to facilitate the adoption of Islamic fintech worldwide. All right. Thank you.
Professor Emilio, just to add a question. As you mentioned that actually in Malaysia, Indonesia, or in other words in the Southeast Asia, they can come up with the easy way of Sharia regulatory frameworks. But how about in the Middle East that you have mentioned there is some obstacles or challenges, but there in the Middle East and some other Muslim countries, and also in the Western countries. Why do you say so, that actually there are challenges, obstacles? What do you think about it?
Well, what I mean is there are some regulators that they don't support pretty much, or I don't want to give some names here, but they don't want to support the small initiatives to compete with banks, because the banking system is quite strong and very powerful in the Gulf, as you can imagine. So there are a lot of there are a lot of interest that from the banking system, traditional banking system, to help them to digitalize, but not to provide the same services that the banking system is providing to the small companies or to the micro enterprises, because it's their bread and butter. So what I mean is there are a lot of good companies into finance, Islamic finance space, Islamic fintech space, sorry, that are can be the winners in the next 5 years, 10 years, but the regulators are not helping them so much as they should be. Okay, basically because the banking industry and the banking ecosystem, the traditional one, is very powerful in the Gulf. All right, so I had as I said, long discussions with the regulators and legislators in Middle East. So they didn't give any straightforward, clear picture, basically because of this, because the traditional banking industry is quite powerful. I don't know how many banks you can find in Bahrain, for example. Maybe you can find more than 400 financial institutions in a very small country, by the way. So and there are very young talent in launching good initiatives into the fintech space, but very few of them are providing real banking services. Okay, real banking services. Okay.
Ms. Nurdana, just to like request you to add something. Why, as Professor Emilio mentioned, that there are challenges or the obstacles in the Middle East and some other countries as compared to Malaysia. The experiencing in Malaysia and Southeast Asia, Ms. Nurdayana, would you please recommend what do you think about it? How the other part of the world can experience from Malaysia, Indonesia, and others in this particular issue?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Prof. Maksum. I think in the context of from Malaysian experience, and also a few countries which are much more very progressive in terms of regulatory environment, for example, Singapore and also Indonesia. I think, of course, there is always the struggle for the regulators to find the balance between safeguarding the mainstream financial industry and the financial institutions while also promote innovation and growth. But I think from the context of Malaysia, MDEC is not a regulator per se, but we in the middle work as an enabler where we kind of connect with both regulators that is in Malaysia, which is the Bank Negara Malaysia and also Securities Commission Malaysia. What I can see looking at these two regulators that we have in Malaysia is that while they try to accommodate the innovation and growth by having a lot of engagement with the industry themselves, they also did not try to make it as a, it's not that they try to safeguard one part and they prejudice the other. So I think in this part I can say that Bank Negara Malaysia and Securities Commission Malaysia is very open. Because both of them, if I can share a little bit, both of the regulators in Malaysia, they do have a very dedicated medium where they can actually speak to the industry, to the fintech industry, and they from that engagement, they are able to come up with better policies that can accommodate to the innovation and growth. For example, for the Bank Negara Malaysia, they have this group called the FTEG, Fintech Technology Enabler Group, where that group actually comprises of cross-functional groups in Bank Negara Malaysia. So that's also, the issue, for example, the issue just now that you mentioned, some parts are being regulated by the Sharia advisors. So this kind of units are able to, see from the regulator perspective a very high overview, and they can provide inputs from different parts of the regulatory department. So I think the key is for having a very open and progressive regulators in the country. That is something that we can, I think that can be made example by the Southeast Asian countries.
Thank you very much. Let me clarify here. Actually, is in Saudi Arabia with the government is, the SAMA, Saudi Monetary Agency, the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia is inviting about 16 or 17 companies to get the license for fintech, and there are many other initiatives are taken by the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia, SAMA. In Dubai, similarly, they are also taking a lot of efforts in coming up with the many solutions, not only regulatory solutions, but applications in United Arab Emirates and many parts of the world. So that's why we cannot simply conclude here that in the Middle East and other Muslim part of the world have some sort of obstacles in implementing or promoting Islamic fintech, but is in their process actually, So now we can conclude here. Before I raise one more question to Mr. Omar Munshi, actually the regulatory frameworks, standard policies, guidelines are equally being planned and undertaken by many parts of the world, not only in Malaysia, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, but many parts of the world that we know in Oman, in Pakistan, and other countries also. But some countries are slow, some countries are quite aggressive way, but they are moving ahead actually. So that's for your own information. Now, one more question we'd like to request from the floor. Please raise your question to Mr. Omar Munshi. how can Islamic fintech respond to the IMF? Can you see that question, Mr. Omar Munshi, on the screen?
Yeah, maybe we can have another question that's more generic, benefit everyone.
Please. Any question, please?
Okay, so maybe you can touch on, if you don't mind, one of the previous questions.
Okay, okay, please.
Yeah, just to add on to Ms. Diana's point. So regulators indeed very important, but there's not much we can do sometimes about it. We can just push them. So that push is very important. I think the community needs to come together, and the community needs to form groups or associations or collaborative groups, and then from the startup community, the investor community, and so on. Because when there is this presence of the community, then you can do more advocacy kind of work. An example, in Indonesia, we have the AFSI, Asosiasi Fintech Sharia Indonesia, which has been very, very active in pushing the regulators over there. And I also have a group with some founders called the Islamic Fintech Alliance. So these kind of groups, I think, can definitely bring not only awareness, but also positive pressure to the stakeholders and the government. Yeah.
Mr. Omar Munshi, just to ask you on issue, what do you, how do you observe the Islamic fintech future in the African continent, like Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, in Sudan, please?
Yes, I think the future is potentially very bright because the need is so high, and there's also a lot of I'm aware from the ground up is starting to move. The wheels are starting to turn right now. So what's very important is the enabling aspects, including the government. But like I mentioned just now, even without the government, there are various ways to do things. As entrepreneurs, you have to look for solutions. For example, if there's no lending license for fintech, you could probably maybe work through a cooperative structure and stuff like that. So there are various avenues to get things moving. And I think this is the next big frontier for Africa, because banking has not worked too well in many parts of Africa. There's so many gaps. And fintech can be done at a very, very community, very, very micro level for small groups of people, and then scale up to the masses. So I believe we will see a lot of interesting things happening in Islamic fintech in Africa, especially since the population, I think, is about 40% Muslim. So inshallah, there's natural market there already that will give the Islamic fintech an advantage.
We will end up our question. That's a small question to Professor Emilio. How do you foresee the future of course, future of fintech is very good in China and Asia Pacific. But how do you foresee the Islamic fintech, the future of Islamic fintech in China and the Asia Pacific market?
Well, the future of Islamic fintech in China, being the largest country by population, is clear. But I'm not only in China. I think that in all over the globe, because to digitalize a bank is just the best thing that can happen in the last 20 years. Definitely, the future is highly positive, not only in China as well as in other parts of the world, as you mentioned before, including Western countries. So there are a lot of opportunities out there, to implement these disruption technologies to facilitate not only the current customers, the future customers, and the minorities to have access to a better platform into the according with the Sharia compliance, and in particular those banks that are already set up as Islamic banks and Islamic financial institutions to improve and be much more competitive for the coming years. So there's definitely there's a very positive, only what I can say is it's a very positive and very, very good, future ahead.
Thank you very much, Professor Emilio. Now, thank you very much for the audience, participants, for your nice question. I'm sorry I could not entertain all questions because of the time constraint. Probably the organizer will facilitate in sharing the email of the speakers or the panelists, so that you can ask question and they can respond to your question that you could not get the answer yet. Now we move to third session, that is final remarks by action plan. So now we have the three panelists who is going to share their thought. What do you recommend as to action plan? As we know that there is an emergence of fintech and Islamic fintech, and there are a lot of market appreciation, and market is expecting that the fintech will play a role as a lead, as a dominant chapter in both in the economy and in the finance, and it's not an exception. The Islamic finance or Islamic economy is not an exception. However, what do you think about the action plan that you recommend as to government initiative? Mr. Ms. Noor Dayan Najwa, please, if you can share your thought. What do you recommend?
Yes, okay, thank you, Prof. Maksum. And I think when we talk about government initiative, it also encompasses the regulators. So I think it was discussed a lot in this session just now. Of course, the regulators need to, kind of step up and see of how they can further accommodate and accommodate the growth of the industry. I think one thing to highlight for every regulator that is out there looking into, spurring the innovation and growth in the fintech industry is that they need to remember that while right now the mainstream financial industry is like the current traditional financial institutions, but in the future we could see that maybe fintech will take over and become the mainstream financial services instead. So there is something to think about, and of course the initiative needs to be put for the regulatory space. I think, but the other parts where government can play an initiative is also into the building the fintech ecosystem, which might not necessarily be from the regulators themselves. So, for example, in Malaysia we have MDEC here, and because for now MDEC plays the role of enabler and also building the ecosystem, and we kind of make sure, because infrastructure is needed infrastructure is needed to be in place in order to attract investments, and then to facilitate new entrants, to accelerate the adoptions, and also to increase awareness, because there's not going to be any adoption if there isn't any awareness about fintech. And so in this case, government also needs to play the role of building the ecosystem by putting initiative comprehensively and targeting the different parts of the ecosystem for the people in general, for the industry, and also for the investors. Yeah, I think those would be some government areas where the government needs to focus on in the future. And I think from the Malaysian context, we are proud to say that we, at least from MDEC perspective, we make sure that initiatives are put in place, and there and I think collaboration is key. As much as regulators need to step forward, I think as mentioned by Mr. Omar and Prof. Emilio just now, incumbents and the player of the fintech industry itself need to come together to really push the agenda so that it can move forward. Yeah, I think that's probably it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Noor Dayana Najwa. Now, as you know that there will be a lot of I think Ms. Noor Dayana has recommended some action plan to be undertaken by the government initiative. But what do you think? What should be the recommended action plan to be undertaken by the corporate sector? Mr. Omar Monshi, please.
Right, so for the corporate sector, I would say that it's already started. Various significant Islamic finance institutions, banks are looking at partnering or investing in fintechs, but there's still a mindset sometimes of let's do it ourselves, which is, I mean, it can work, but historically data shows that there's a tougher route to take. So I think the openness to accept challenges who are small compared to the banks or compared to the financial institution, that openness of mindset needs to be there, at all levels, from the board level to the working level. And in addition to that, there's also right now a big gap in funding from early stage. There are a lot of angel investors coming out today to invest in interesting ideas. And there are a lot of large fund managers and private equity firms in Islamic finance, but there are very few VCs. I think just now was mentioned as well. So this venture investing or venture capital investment, I feel there's a lot of scope for Islamic finance to move into this. It's very, very fundamentally Islamic in terms of the spirit of risk-taking and to encourage entrepreneurship. So inshallah, I think when there's more money going into venture capital from Islamic finance and for Islamic fintech, I think that is something that will make a lot of difference.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omar Morsi. Probably we may add two more components here for the action plan. The corporate collaboration. What do you think about is it important to have the corporate collaboration in order to enrich or to boost up the Islamic finance and its services?
Yes, definitely. So just giving an example, for a bank or a large financial institution to come up with a new product, to get the approval for that product will probably take at least 6 months. Then to develop it, they will go and get tenders and so on, and they'll probably be overcharged. And to fit it into the existing legacy systems will be another challenge again. To get the people to having the mindset of being nimble and changing and adjusting the product to fit the market because it's a new product, that again is another challenge. So the collaboration can be in the form of sort of outsourcing innovation to startups. A small amount, $100,000, $50,000 can mean a lot to a startup, but $50,000 in the bank as a budget, you can't really do much. Yeah, so the collaboration part is very, very key, whether it's in R&D or whether it's in doing business together.
Mr. Omar Morsi, just one more issue. Do you think that this particular question being raised by 2 or 3 audience participants, do you think that the existing central bank or the financial authorities of respective countries can play the role in governing or managing or regulating the Islamic financial fintech movement? Or we need to propose another separate entity called Digital Financial Authority? Do you think that it is important, that the question being raised by the participants? Please.
Yeah, I think the model in Malaysia, and I'm not saying this because Diana is here, but the model of having an enabler organization like MDEC, I think that helps. But at the end of the day, the financial regulation, I assume, will be quite difficult for it to move away from the central bank or the Financial Services Authority in all the different countries. Yeah.
MDEC is the Malaysian Digital Economy Development Corporation, actually.
Correct, yes. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, now, next, thank you very much, Mr. Omar Morsi. Now, next here is, as you know, that the essence and the emergence, the niche of Islamic fintech is appreciated and acknowledged by all level of this authorities, participants, market players, the users, professionals, and so on. But now, do you think, Professor Emilio, that there is a there is a danger that going on actually if we do not have enough research or findings or solution yet, then it may hamper the growth of the Islamic fintech? Do you think that we have enough research or solution yet, or what do you suggest actually, and what should be the action plan? Professor Emilio?
I think, yeah, regarding the customers, the competition, the data, all these value addition that all in combined definitely will promote and to help, the activity. I think there are a lot of things to do all together. I mean, in particular, to develop and grow, so for example, the robo advisors, for example, also in emerging markets or frontier markets, such as in North Africa or Central Africa. So all these new possibilities for improving efficiencies, so have to be, all Incumbents developed for these, main pillars. Okay, the innovation, the data, all the competitors, including the customers and the regulators. So I was, when I mentioned before that the initiatives into the fintech, Islamic fintech space is not very well developed, are not very well developed in the Gulf. I didn't want to say that. I wanted to say that there are a lot of support from the regulators to the fintech startups, but I never seen a fintech startup in the last 5 years to become a bank nowadays. Okay, this is what I want to say to clarify all the doubts from the audience. Definitely what Bahrain is doing and promoting is highly appreciated, as well as, for example, the launching of ADGM, and including the role of DIFC puts the United Arab Emirates in a pole position of a better place to launch a company. But I want to say that from the funding wise, there are, we need the support of the more venture capital or business angels players to inject small amounts or humble amounts or big amounts into the fintech startups, because is the only way to to help them or to boost them to go to the next level and develop the ecosystem in the region, right? So I think there are a lot of develops and initiatives launched in that region, as well as in Asia. And if you go to and ask the users in Islamic banking, all of them, they are ready to look elsewhere for a better digital experience.
Yes, Professor, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Just because of the time constraint, I'm sorry for that. Now, just to add here that the professionalism, the professional development, we have lack of professionals in the Islamic fintech. Therefore, it is also important aspect that we need to have some sort of action plan from the academic environment, from the regulators environment, from the industrial environment. They have to have an effective initiative to establish the professionals or create the professionals who are equipped with Islamic fintech knowledge and experiences. So this is very important. Now, thank you very much for the action plan. Now, we would like to close our session with a few concerned issues. Here is the, as we know that fintech is undeniably appreciated by the different part of the world and different sectors, not only this from the government perspective, but government, regulatory authorities, the industries, professionals, market players, market participants. But even though the growth is quite rapid and is moving very fast, but we have a lot of shortcomings that our respected panelists also highlighted. Now, let me sum up here some of the points that need to be focused on in order for us to see the future of Islamic fintech with effective results. First is the technical know-how. We are not equipped yet. Secondly, the professional skills or the professional development. Now, for this particular issue, I just would like to highlight here that or share with you that the university should initiate with different kind of this Islamic fintech courses and programs. Like, for example, in the Islamic Economics Institute of King Abdulaziz University has recently initiated the idea of proposing for a master program in Islamic fintech. And that is a very good idea, and this will aim to develop a group of scholars specializing in Islamic fintech. So that I believe that this will be another point. The different universities or the government or Ministry of Education can play a role. Third issue here, the regulatory frameworks. We are lacking in regulatory frameworks, and that, as you mentioned, Ms. Diana mentioned, and Mr. Omar also has mentioned to me that like MDEC probably will play a greater role in this matter, not only Central Bank of Malaysia, but Central Bank of other countries, but there should be a specific body who will be responsible to develop the digital economy or digital finance or digital operation, digital regulatory frameworks. So that will be a good solution. Now, next issue here, the policies, guidelines, standard, and manuals. Like we have the IFSB, we have IOFI, and International Fiqh Academy, and many other Islamic regulatory organizations. They may play a role, or there should be a new set of alternative authorities to come up with the standard policies, guidelines, manuals, the standard and regulatory frameworks, so that this will facilitate the smooth this running of fintech, Islamic fintech under the Sharia principles. Product innovation, another issue. Screening mechanism that I have highlighted here, that screening mechanism is very, very important to survive, to have the sustainable existence of Islamic fintech. Planning and strategies that our panelists also emphasize on that. There should be proper planning and strategies, market strategies, research and development, and also last but not least, global awareness. So global awareness is very important because of there are many, not only public, but also the industries, the practitioners, regulators, scholars are confused with the idea of fintech. It's a very technical issue. Therefore, the public awareness or the global awareness is very important. With that, thank you very much. And I will pass over the session to the organizer, Mr. Gonzalo. Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you, Prof. Masoom. On behalf of SCIEF, just to say thank you to all the audience, to you, Prof. Masoom, for this excellent moderation, to Emilio from my business school, to Jana from Malaysian Digital Economy Corporation, and to Umar from ETHIS. Thank you very much. And we will inform you of new sessions like this, SCIEFtalks. So stay tuned, and thanks for sharing. Okay, we're in touch. Thank you very much. Has been really interesting.
Thank you. Shukran.
Shukran. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Prof. Emilio. Thank you, Zumar.
Bye.
Gracias. Bye.